Hey everyone, this is C5 Tour here. I'm going to make a little video about some of the tools that you might want to have when you're working on your Alta Redshift. The company now has been out of business for a little over a year, and as you know, Alta Redshift is an electric motorcycle, so while you want your regular tools like your wrenches and your Allen wrenches and things like that to do standard maintenance like tires and suspension and all the other good stuff that comes with the motorcycle, you clearly don't have a standard motor and things like a carburetor that you have to worry about, which is great and why I bought the bike. But it does have a lot of electronics that you can't work on with traditional tools. And one thing that we do have available that the Alta Owners Forum has gotten their hands on is a version of Multitool, which is the diagnostic software that the company used when they were developing the bike. And you can look at certain things on the bike that you couldn't with the dealer version of the laptop, and some people have those. But the engineering version that we have available is actually much more capable. And we actually have the new firmware, or the latest firmware that came out from Alta before they closed their doors. And quite a few machines have older firmware that doesn't let them use things like the newer rapid charger. So there's a few things you'd want to do with the software that you could only do in Multitool. So you can clear codes, you can look at the individual P groups in the battery, which aren't the individual cells, but are groups of cells. You can update the firmware, or you can downgrade the firmware if you'd like. We can't directly tweak the firmware yet. That's a goal for the future, but you can do a bunch of things with Multitool that you just can't do anywhere else. So the point of this video is that I've put together a little kit that somebody that might need to use the Multitool software. If you're not computer savvy enough to follow some instructions, or you don't have a laptop, or you don't even own the bike yet and you want to perhaps go take a look at a used bike, then you can go and perhaps borrow the kit. Or if you are an owner of the bike, I'd highly recommend that you put together your own laptop with the software. The real point of the whole thing is that, you know, sometimes you just need the software to do certain things, especially with firmware, and sometimes that's the easiest fix. So I'll take you around here and show you a little kit that I put together. As I said, we have quite a few members that are experienced with the bike. There are instructions on how to install the software yourself, and I would highly recommend doing that. It's not very expensive. Pick up an old used laptop. It is a Linux piece of software, so you need to install that, and that's probably the hardest part for most people. So for those that aren't savvy enough to do it, that's why I put this kit together that you can borrow if needed. Or if you need to get some more help, we certainly have some videos out there. Special thanks to Brian Haskell for putting together videos on how to install the software and how to use the software. And that's not the point of this video. It's really how to connect the cables and what is in the kit. So as you can see, I put together a nice little padded case that has a few things in it. I'm including a L1430 to 515, which is a 240 volt to 120 volt adapter. So if you have a rapid charger and you want to charge on 120 volt, you'll need one of those. I'm including this one specifically for folks that either want to test a known good adapter, or you're going to test out a used bike, and because you don't always have 240 available, but you probably do have 110 available. So that will be in the kit. There's a power supply for the laptop. Here's kind of the most important piece of the kit. There's actually 3 parts to this cable. You purchase this part separately from one of our AOF members. This is the part that plugs into the bike, and it's a proprietary cable. And then there's a CAN bus to USB adapter. Here's the second part of the cable that plugs into the little blue part, and this lets the laptop talk to the CAN bus, which is a standard thing to talk to, cars and other things. So that will be part of it. Also in the kit, we have a laptop. In this particular case, the laptop has been set up as a dual boot for both Windows and Ubuntu, which is a flavor of Linux. And you do need to run Linux, but there's a couple ways to run it. I chose to do dual boot on this one for performance reasons. These older laptops aren't super quick, so I didn't really want to run Ubuntu under Windows and then have shared resources. I was having some issues with that. So this is a legit way to run it. Running, if you have a little more horsepower and memory on your machine, running something like VirtualBox or Oracle VirtualBox under Windows, you can run Linux under that. And that's the instructions that we have on YouTube from Brian Haskell, so thanks for that. Or you could just install a version of Linux on laptop by itself if you didn't want to use it for anything else other than working on the Alta. Then that's a good way to go too, and it's much simpler. Again, I went the dual boot method for this. So, hooking this thing up. It's not too difficult, but that's kind of the point of this video, is make it simple. Unless you've read the manual, and not all of this is in the manual, you'll want to know where all the cables go. So you got your laptop, your cables, then you got your bike. The diagnostic port is under the seat, so you have to remove the seat. There's one bolt. I've replaced it with a knurled knob bolt. It's an M6. If you're going to go and take a look at a bike, you're going to want to bring some Allen wrenches. I have some here. I believe that's it's an M6 bolt, but with a 5mm Allen bolt. So there's just one. It's right there. You need to slide this backwards, and then you can set it aside. And there's hooks there, and there's a hook there, and when you put it back on, it'll slide into that. So your diagnostic port is right here. It's near the charging port, which is up there, and it just comes out. Doesn't matter what direction it goes. Put that aside and do not lose that. You do not want that getting wet. The cables, as I said, are a little proprietary. There's a little knot right there, or notch right there, and it does not go straight up and down. It actually turns to the right, is where the notch goes. So it's a little tricky to get it in there sometimes, but it only goes in one way. So that's, like I said, the hard part. And there it is. So it's plugged in. You have the cable in. The other end is a USB, and we'll plug that into the laptop in a second. So you can do certain things with just the cable and the laptop. If you're really looking at the battery and the health of the battery, you'll probably want to have the charger plugged in as well, and charging, which I have another video on how to plug in the charger. That will show you how the battery is charging and how all the P groups are responding to the charger. And that can be useful in finding out if you have a bad P group in your battery or things like that. For the purposes of this video, I'm not going to cover that. So then we need to plug everything in here. So in this case, we'll plug this into USB port. I will plug the the power into the notebook. If you are doing something like a firmware update, I would highly recommend you plug in the battery and the laptop to make sure they don't turn off. And on this little yoga model, the power is on the side. You'll know it's on when that button comes on. Once again, this is a dual boot system, so the first thing that will come up when it boots here is a menu to go into the various operating systems. Ubuntu is the first option. Windows is the last option on this particular one. When Ubuntu is booting, it actually takes about 40 seconds before Ubuntu shows up, and then you'll get a login screen at that point. So it's a little disconcerting because nothing seems to happen at first, but just be patient. And as I said, it takes about 40 seconds. So if you are borrowing the kit, I would recommend that you take the kit with you. You certainly want to have an adapter if you want to use the rapid charger at a dealership or somebody's house, because they probably won't have a handy 240 volt outlet, say in a garage or at their house. And you're going to want to make sure that the bike charges with the charger that you have. You want to make sure the bike turns on. You want to make sure that it isn't throwing any codes on the display for the bike. And just that everything powers up okay. The point of the kit here, the laptop, is to check the firmware versions, clear any codes if you can, take a look at how the battery state is, and if all the modules in the battery are roughly equal. They won't be 100% equal, but close enough is good, and that one isn't much lower than the others, for instance. So you'll get the Ubuntu login here. I'll supply the password if you actually borrow this one, but it isn't any different if you build your own. And it runs pretty quick on its own when you're not running under Windows, so it comes up fairly fast. And here we have our Ubuntu desktop. It's very similar to Windows if you're a Windows user. Applications are on the left. I've pre-installed the Alta Multitool here. I've also downloaded Redshift owner's manuals for the 2018 and 19 and the 2017 models. Those are on the hard drive, so you don't even need an internet connection to do that. Actually, none of this, you don't need any of this to do or to have an internet connection, unless you want to use Firefox, which is your web browser, to go out and view the excellent videos that one of our members, Brian Haskell, put together for how to use Multitool, which I'm not going to really go into very much right now. This was really how to get into the laptop, how to connect the laptop to the bike, and what you would use the kit for. So in this case, I have both the touch pad down here, and it's a touch screen. So if you want to double click, you can do that. It's going to ask for a password. It's going to launch Multitool. And a note, I am on internet, which if you pull this little down arrow, Up here, you can connect to your own Wi-Fi if you'd like to do that. In this case, I don't have the bike on, so I usually want to have that on. If you ever do want to get out of Multitool, then you just click up here, the X in the corner. And let me show you how to do that. If you haven't turned on a Redshift before, all you really need to do is turn on the key, and then it should power up. If it doesn't power up, you're in bad shape from the get-go if you're looking at a used bike. If you have the charger plugged in as well, you might want it charging, in which case you set it to run. I'm not going to have it to run right here, it's off. And again, you would have the power plugged in here if you want to take a look at how the battery is charging and not just update the firmware or something. So we'll leave the key on while we're in Multitool. It's plugged in. I'll come back here, start Multitool again. I didn't really need to stop this, but I wanted to show you how it worked. And we're launching Multitool again. Hopefully we'll see a little bit different data now that the bike is on. And I actually do have the firmware JSON files in the correct directory on this machine already. The firmware for the MX, MXR, EX, EXR, and the SM are on the machine. So it knew that based on my VIN number, my recommended firmware was 151. This machine, or my Alta, came from the dealer. I actually had them update it to 151 already, so it's at the latest. And we're on the versions tab. Again, there's an excellent how-to video on how to use Multitool already on YouTube. So I'll just touch on a couple of the items that you might be wanting to look at in Multitool if you like checking out a new bike. One is that what the installed firmware version is, which is right here, making sure that you're getting data from the bike, what type it is, etc. Does the VIN number match the VIN on the bike, etc. And those are kind of the big ones. As far as data, there's lots of data on this particular screen, and you can scroll down. So the interesting part on this screen would be the update firmware button, which you can do with this kit. As I said, the firmware is on there and it knows which one is recommended. Usually after you do a firmware, you might need to do motor timing to sync the timing based on the new firmware. So that's important. You're probably not too interested in the live data necessarily for the machine, although it is downloading data here. You probably want to take a quick look at the dashboard so you can see your state of charge, see if that agrees with what's on your display on your bike. You can see that it's live data right now. You can see the module, temperatures, and things like that. Again, this Brian does an excellent job in his video on going through the various features of Multitool. In addition, you might want to take a look at the battery. So in this case, there's a chart where you can adjust the scale here, and you can look at each of your modules. Mine are pretty even. I'm narrowed down pretty far to 4 to 4.2 volts. I can see that I have one tiny little low one right there, but it's not too far out. That's probably my problem child as far as I have a P group. I believe each P group is 6 cells. That one's always a teensy bit lower than most of the other ones, but not always. But it hasn't dropped low enough to throw any codes or anything, so I do have the MXR with the R pack. I'm always worried about is there going to be some kind of issue with the wire bonds on one of these P groups, but so far it's holding up okay. Again, that one's a little lower than the other ones, but so far so good. Your bike will run even if one of those P groups stops working. It'll just have a slightly lower capacity. You might want to look at faults, see if any of these are popping up. This auxiliary third-party device usually pops up if you have the bike plugged into Multitool, which we do. If you have an EXR, a few more of these might pop up, like your headlights and things like that. But good news for me, no faults over here with the battery or the inverter, so crossing fingers it'll stay that way. But you want to take a look at things like that if you're checking out a new bike or if you're having these on your old bike. You can clear faults there, that kind of thing. If you really want to get tricky and update individual firmwares for various components, you can do it there. I think you can also do the overall firmware from here as well. It's a little more powerful. You can put things in different directories and not have to have them in a specific directory. And Brian goes into that in his video towards the end of the how-to. And then just some basic info on what error codes are. So if you see one of these on your display, that's kind of what is going on. So this will help you, diagnose whether the battery looks good, whether the firmware is up to date, and things like that. There's more things that you can do with the software, but those are the biggies, and why you might want to borrow the kit if you aren't planning to get your own laptop. Like I said, I would highly, highly recommend, if you own one of these cool, magnificent bikes, you should have a laptop with the Multitool running. It's just an excellent tool to have, and it's really the only way to see some of the data about the battery and the firmware and things like that. So I hope this was helpful on how to hook up the bike, how to launch Multitool. Again, refer to some of the other videos on YouTube. Just look up Alta Multitool, Multitool one word, and you'll get some very detailed information on how to install it and how to use it, thanks to our fellow Alta Owners Forum members. And check out altaownersforum.com for all sorts of discussions and reference material on how to use and troubleshoot these bikes. So that's it, and thanks from C5 Tour.